Hi, I'm Ash, and welcome to Let's Explore Baldur's Gate 3. Or, if you're here for my last video, welcome back! If you're confused, don't worry. The last video is only the first video in the series, so you're not arriving mid-season or anything. Now, you don't need to have seen the first video to understand what's going on in this video, because they're about different things, but I am going to expand on a point that I made in that video at the end of this one. So if you want to give it a scrub over, here's the link. Anyway, like I said, let's explore Baldur's Gate 3. In this series, I will break down D&D lore related to Baldur's Gate 3 for the layperson. In this video, I'm going to go over some of Dungeons & Dragons' many gods, and don't worry, there's only a handful that are actually relevant in Baldur's Gate 3, and we're only going to go over those. We'll go over what is known about their backgrounds and their relationships and interactions with mortals in Faerûn as well. This video will contain some minor spoilers for Baldur's Gate 3. I guess it depends on what you consider a major or minor spoiler, but if you want a completely spoiler-free playthrough, I would skip this video probably until you finish the game. Now, if you did watch the last video, or if you just got back from watching it, thank you. You might be happy to know that in this video, I'm going to tell you the story of the War of the Seladrine. And we can all finally learn why the Drow hate everyone, but mostly the elves, and vice versa. First, we have to talk about the several elephants in the room. The Dead. Otherwise known as Bane, Ball, and Mirkul, or Merkel, as some people say, apparently. The short version is that a billion zillion years ago, Bane, Ball, and Mirkul were nothing more than three evil mortals, human adventurers who would form an exceptionally ambitious band of malevolent murder hobos who decided they would not just conquer the world. They were going to conquer the heavens too. They wanted to be gods, and they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. It was no small feat by any means, but eventually they earned an audience with the original god of death called Jergal. He appreciated their efforts and their power, and luckily for them, he was just kind of sick of his job. He pretty much laid godhood in their laps. There were three of them, of course, and obviously, only one butt can fill the throne. So the three played a game of knucklebones to decide who would be the true god of death. Bane came out on top. He won, and he declared himself the almighty, biggest ball, havinest king of everything forever, or something like that. Meanwhile, Mirkul would become the god of bones, or the god of, like, being dead, whereas Ball would become the god of murder, or the act of making someone dead, I guess. The three began their new lives as death gods, and they probably got emo haircuts or something. But why are they called the Dead Three, I hear you asking? Assuming that it is some kind of metaphor related to how when they took up godhood, their mortal selves died. But no, it's because they're dead. They're dead. How's that possible? Well, let me just tell you. A long time ago, but not quite as long ago as the first story, there was a period called the Time of Troubles. It marks a period of 4 months when all of the gods were cast out of the heavens by the god of all gods, whose name is Ao. He cast them out and forced them to walk Faerûn as mortals. During this time, several gods were killed or forever changed, and several enterprising mortals ascended to godhood in their place. Needless to say, it was a crazy few months. You see, normally the gods, they kind of just hang out in their own little dimension, floating around with all of the souls of the mortals who worshipped them in life. But some of the gods, aka our boys, Bane, Ball, and Mirkul, they were already somehow bored of their godhood, and as power-hungry deities do, they wanted more power. And so, our boys decided to steal some very important artifacts from Ao in hopes of usurping his power. Ao rounded up all of the gods and demanded that whoever stole his artifacts give them back now, but no one fessed up. So he punished them all. Bane, Ball, and Mirkul did their best to keep their treachery and the artifacts a secret, but over the course of a long, drawn-out, complicated adventure, the adventurers managed to slay Bane, Ball, and Mirkul in mortal form, and one of these adventurers, an evil human named Sirik, took all the credit for doing so, and he also made sure that he was the one to return Eo's artifacts to him. For his deeds, Cyric was rewarded with godhood, and he was granted control over the domains of the now dead three, making him the new god of death. Cyric doesn't really get brought up in Baldur's Gate 3 as far as I know, so I'm gonna leave his story there, but it is a really interesting story. The only reason the dead three have any influence on Faerûn anymore is because gods tend to always have a contingency plan. In the event of their death, they will make sure to secure a bit of their own essence somewhere on the planet, like just somewhere hidden away, to be discovered, so that they can, they hope, be resurrected one day. I think most or all gods probably do this, so it's not out of the ordinary or anything. But yeah, the influence of the dead three, it tends to negatively affect Faerûn on a pretty regular basis. Considering all three Baldur's Gate games are about that very thing, I guess it makes for a great story. So earlier I mentioned the original god of death, Jergal, who stepped down willingly from his post and handed over godhood to the dead three. Yeah, for some reason he is in this game. It's never confirmed in game, but it's very heavily implied that it's him. So I'm gonna explain a little bit about Jergal, and if you've played the game, I bet you know exactly who I'm talking about. So Jergal is, as I said, an ancient god, one of the original gods to ever have existed. Faerûn's original god of death, strife, and murder. After ages and ages and ages and ages of serving his purpose, he grew so tired of his responsibilities and gave his job up. He was apathetic towards mortals and had few or no interest other than the accurate, orderly, and meticulous documentation of every mortal soul that passes on from this world. He was known as the final scribe, and he would then go on to serve as an advisor to Mirkul and to the other gods of death who would follow in his place. Now, who do we know who's a dusty old bitch who dotes on his boring list and strikes people's names off when they're not ready to die yet? Besides me. Anyway, you get the picture. Next, I want to talk about Shar and Selûne. They were both created at the same time as the universe was created by Eo, so they are also ancient gods, original gods. Shar represented darkness, the void, nothingness, and loss. In Faerûn, worshipping Shar is not something you advertise. Shrines and offerings to Shar were often done in the dead of night and were very subtle, because in Shar's dogma, perfection is nothing. It's commonly known of as the Lady of Loss, or the Mistress of the Night, or some other variation of that, and she is generally worshipped by people who hate the light, people who are nocturnal, and people who have great pain or bitterness that they want to forget. They turn to Shar in hopes that she will replace their pain with numbness. Her followers believe that for the most part, but I think that clerics of other deities, and even probably some of her own followers, understand her true intent. While she can and does take away people's pain and their memories to replace it with nothing or numbness, she does it with the sole purpose of relishing in the suffering of mortals. Selûne, the Moon Maiden, is Shar's twin sister, created at the same time as she was, and is the absolute polar opposite of Shar. Selûne represents light and guidance and purity. Selûne cares deeply for mortals, and she's known to give blessings often to those in need. Her worshippers come from any and all walks of life, from sailors in need of her guidance to diviners seeking answers from their dreams. Many people worship or at least respect Selûne, and shrines to her are plentiful and usually beautiful. The two sisters are like yin and yang. They're darkness and light. You can't have one without the other. When they were created, they worked together for a time to fill the universe that Eo had created with life. But then, as sisters do, they had a disagreement. Selûne wished to provide the universe with warmth to create more life, whereas Shar disagreed, and they were both so passionate about their stance on this subject that it turned them against each other. Selûne created the sun against Shar's wishes, which initiated an eternal battle of light versus dark that still rages to this day. A lit candle is snuffed out by a cold breeze. The sun rises and burns away the shadows. Their battle is present everywhere, and as long as there is balance, there is life. Next, I want to talk about Mystra. Mystra is the goddess who controls the source of all magic in Faerûn, known as the Weave. She was first known of as Mistral, which is very similar name, but they are kind of separate people. But basically what happened was, during the battle between Shar and Selûne, Selûne fired a piece of her own essence at Shar, which combined with a dislodged piece of Shar's essence and created Mistral. She was the creation of chaos, darkness and light combined, and thus all magic that existed while she was around was very chaotic and very powerful. Then, much later, in the mortal empire of Netheril, the fate of the entire empire was at stake as the reckless and unregulated use of magic began to take its toll on the planet. In hopes of taking control of the Weave to save his people, an archwizard named Karsus spent years creating and perfecting a spell that would siphon the powers of a deity into himself, making him a god. He chose, obviously, to steal the powers of the Lady of Magic herself, Mistral, and it worked. But he quickly realized that he was completely incapable of wielding such power. In a matter of only a few moments, as Mistral's power filled and overwhelmed Karsus, all magic in the world was uncontrollable and wild. Mistral was forced to sacrifice herself in order to sever her connection with Karsus and to wrest back control of the Weave from the brink. In Mistral's absence, the universe was devoid of magic and Netheril began to crumble. It only took a few minutes for Mistral to reincarnate herself and take back control of the Weave, but in that time Netheril was completely destroyed, save for 3 cities, which today are nothing but ruins. Mistral's reincarnation would be called Mystra, and her approach to the regulation and use of magic was far more lawful than her past chaotic self. Mystra laid down several rules about the use of magic and strictly limited the amount and power of magic that mortals were allowed to harness and control, in hopes that nothing like what happened to Netheril would ever happen again. Mystra would then be killed 2 more times after this with catastrophic outcomes, but eventually she was restored to her former glory by the wizard Elminster Amar, giving us the lawful neutral mother of magic we have today. A couple other gods I'm gonna briefly go over now just because they're there are Umberlee and Gond. Their presence is very minor in Baldur's Gate 3, but you know, some people might want some more info about them, and I figured why not. So Umberlee is the chaotic evil goddess of the sea. Most people who worship her do so out of fear. She is a goddess just as cruel and vicious as the sea. There's nowhere her wind and waves can't reach. Anyone who spends a lot of time near the water will typically have offered a prayer or 2 to her in their life. Umberlee hates Selûne, she hates a bunch of other gods, she kind of hates everyone. She's just a very jealous, vicious, evil, mean, rude person, which is very fitting for her nickname is the Bitch Queen. Now Gond is the Lord of Invention. His dogma encourages creation at any cost, and I thought this was kind of interesting. You know, the time of troubles from before. During that time when Gond, with the rest of the gods, was sent to walk Faerûn as a mortal, he washed up on the shore of an island called Lantern as a gnome, and he was immediately recognized for his divinity. And obviously, they treated him very, very well. And for their kindness, Gond rewarded them with the secret to creating smoke powder, which, if you've played the game, you'll know is a very important substance in Faerûn. It's basically just an extremely potent explosive enhanced by magic. Some people believed that this was a curse because of the violence that it would lead to, an invention of firearms and things, while some people saw it as a boon, as a great gift, and that all of that is very indicative of Gond in general, because he is often seen as very reckless and ignoring of the consequences in the effort just to create. So I thought that was kind of cool. Hello, just a heads up. The War of the Seladrine has absolutely nothing to do with Baldur's Gate 3. It's just a follow-up topic from my last video. So if you were just here for the Baldur's Gate 3 stuff, you can go ahead and head out now if you like. And thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you, and I hope to see you in the next one. But if you want to stick around, you can learn a bit about the drow and the elves. Otherwise, we'll see you later. All right, finally gather around. Everybody gather around. It's what you've all been waiting for. We're going to talk about the War of the Seladrine. All right, so as a reminder, the elven gods are called the Seladrine, and at the very tippy top is a chaotic good god called a chaotic good god called Corion Larethian. A bagullion years ago, Corion fell madly in love with the elven goddess of artisans called Arashni. He would eventually marry Arashni, and for many years, Corion, Arashni, and the elven goddess of moonlight named Seladrine would rule all of the elves together. Why 3? I don't know. Don't ask. Arashni had beautiful dark skin like the night sky unblemished by stars, and thus she was given dominion over the dark-skinned elves that existed at that time. Corion and Arashni would have 2 children named Eilistrae and Veron, and they both bore Arashni's dark complexion. After some amount of time, Arashni became unsatisfied with her station and began to plot to overthrow her husband Corion and take over the elven pantheon for herself. She decided that Corion was weak, and that she would do a much better job at the tippy top than he ever had. At that time, Corion was always fighting with the god of the orcs named Grumsh, and so Arashni kind of decided to collab with him, and they were gonna overthrow the elves together, or she was at least going to enlist his help in killing her husband. One dark night, Arashni would craft for Corion a cursed scabbard that would cause his sword to shatter the next time he used it in combat. And then she armed Grumsh with this knowledge, leading him to pick a fight with Corion. Fortunately for him, Seladrine, their other partner, is the goddess of moonlight, and thus she witnessed Arashni's treachery firsthand, and she was able to intervene and restore Corion's weapon in time to save him. For some reason, however, she didn't feel the need to inform Corion of Arashni's treachery, so he just went home. And in his weakened state, he was then attacked again by the god of beasts called Malar, who was also goaded into fighting the weakened Corion by Arashni in hopes of killing him. Malar's attack also failed, and Arashni's ideas for killing her husband didn't improve. She decided she was going to try the old cursed scabbard trick again, but this time it instead would draw the arrows of their own daughter Eilistrae. I believe she wanted to remain on good terms with the elven people and come to power in a way that seemed unexpected, and used their daughter as a scapegoat. She had like a group chat with all of the other deities who really hated the elves, and she informed them that Corion was really weak right now, and it would be a good time for all of them to just gang up on his ass and take over the elven pantheon. They were really poorly organized, which was by design. She knew they would not be, even in his weakened state, any match for Corion, but she hoped that the cursed scabbard would then cause her daughter to kill him during the battle that would happen. What Arashni didn't expect, though, was that at the time, Eilistrae was using orc-sized arrows that were too large to penetrate her father's ribcage, and so he was injured by her arrow, but he was not killed. In a last-ditch effort, Arashni tried to poison Corion to finally kill him, but she was again stopped by Seladrine Moonbow, who told her to
stop it. Get some help.
And finally put an end to all of Arashni's treachery. I also forgot to mention that their son Veron had been helping his mom conspire against Corion this whole time. But after the battle, they were all 3, Eilistrae, Veron, and Arashni, put on trial and sentenced to be exiled. Arashni was banished to the abyss and was transformed into a demon that resembled a giant spider, while Eilistrae and Veron would wander Toril, where they would become the good and evil aligned deities, respectively, that would be worshipped by the Dark Elves. Now, the abyss was not prepared for this boss babe's arrival, because as soon as she got there, she changed her name to Lolth, and she took over a whole section of the abyss for herself, beginning to amass power so that she could exact her revenge on Corion and the rest of the Seladrine for kicking her ass out. Her plan was basically to be worshipped by the elves and to bring them misery, which I guess would, by proxy, bring Corion misery too. Sensing the presence of her children, and therefore dark elves, in Toril, she turned her attention there and began to sow discord among the elves there. She slowly became a recognized deity among the dark elves, and her hatred for the Seladrine proliferated through them. Due to the conflict caused by Lolth, the other elves were kind of like, hey, we gotta do something about this dark elf nonsense right now, you guys gotta go. Except their version contained a lot more genocide, but that was basically how the dark elves became the drow, and they were chased underground to the underdark by the other elves, where they remain to this day. Over the years, Lolth's influence in Toril would grow and wane, and would eventually kind of balance out to where she is now. She never really got revenge on Corian or the Seladrine because she enjoyed screwing with the drow and watching them tear each other apart too much. Perhaps one day her power will actually be any kind of threat to Corian and she might get her revenge, but for now she seems kind of content to just watch the drama that happens between her own followers. That's kind of it. I hope you enjoyed this video. There are far more deities in Dungeons & Dragons than the ones that I mentioned here, but these are the main ones that I could think of that were relevant to Baldur's Gate 3. Did I miss any? Was there any that you wanted to hear about that I didn't talk about? If so, leave a comment and let me know, and I will probably make a follow-up video about them later. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching to the end. Don't forget to leave a like if you liked the video, and if you're interested in this series, go ahead and subscribe so that you don't miss out on the rest of the videos for this series. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.